The only way he squeezes this in here if everybody blocks. Wow. Great effort. Everybody getting out in front of it. And then Amon-Ra just makes a play. And then this dance.
Gets a nice block on Kyler Gordon. The offensive line get
Great
out there.
stuff by the offensive line, receivers.
St. Brown, he's just following his blockers, keeps two hands
Beautiful.
on the football, gets in for the touch.
Lions look to right their last wrong of the 2024 season in a rematch of the NFC Championship game. It could mean nothing, but it could mean everything. Welcome back to the channel. I am your host, Johnny Gaz. Thank you for returning for another video. The Lions travel to San Francisco in Week 17. This will be on Monday Night Football, kickoff December 30th at 8:15 p.m. Could be for a number one seed in all the marbles, but it could just mean prep for next week. Either way, I'm going to give you a game preview. We'll start with the headlines and storylines from this week. We'll talk about the key matchups and the X factors from this game. I'll tell you what the difference will be, and at the end of the video, I will give you my final score and prediction, so make sure to stick around. Let's go. Let's kick it off with the Lions headlines from this week. The Lions re-signed quarterback Teddy Bridgewater. Former backup quarterback, left the organization, ended up going to coach his former high school alma mater, Miami Northwestern, to a Class A state championship. He's now going to return to the NFL and has been activated to the Lions' 53-man roster. He will provide the veteran leadership and a great backup to Jared Goff. The Lions have opened up wide receiver and special teams returner Khalif Raymond's 21-day injury reserve window. They will evaluate him over the next several weeks and see if they can get him back prior to the playoff run. As we get towards the end of the season, some players have some incentives built into their salaries, and that does apply to Lions players Zadarius Smith and Jared Goff. Zadarius Smith, if he gets to 10 sacks on the season, he will earn a $250,000 bonus. If he gets to 12 sacks, that will earn him an additional $250,000. Jared Goff, if the team makes the Super Bowl, will earn a base salary increase of $1 million. I think we can all agree we want Jared to get that bag. Due to all the shuffling the Lions have been doing with their roster because of these injuries, they've had some players come into and out of the organization. This week they lost David Long, their linebacker depth piece, who they had to waive to be able to add an additional wide receiver and kick returner Maurice Alexander. Unfortunately, David Long was quickly snagged up by the Tennessee Titans. It's one of those negative sides to having to make so many roster moves towards the end of the season. Lions are become masters of roster manipulation. Because of the Lions playing on Monday night, there is a lot of seeding implications that may take place prior to this Monday night matchup against the 49ers. So a lot of questions were to be answered if this game really didn't mean anything for the NFC North standings and number one seed. Would the Lions then play full board against the 49ers? Well, Dan Campbell put a stop to that right away and said regardless of the outcome of Sunday's games, the Lions will do everything in their power to try and win on Sunday against the 49ers. And a few injury updates from this week. Let's start with the long term. We know Aiden Hutchinson is eyeballing a return for the Super Bowl and even potentially an NFC Championship game. Alex Anzalone is on the fast track to get back. He will be out this week, but could return potentially next week for a Week 18 matchup against Minnesota. We know David Montgomery, who sought the second and third opinion, will be rehabbing his MCL. He's another guy that is set to return for the playoffs. Terrion Arnold, a new injury here this week for the Lions. He did not practice on Thursday. He has an undesignated illness. We will keep our ear to the ground on that one as we get closer to this game with the 49ers. On the good news end of things, full practice was Graham Glasgow, the guard who missed last week, replaced very well by Christian Mahogany, their sixth-round draft pick, but he will re-enter the starting lineup, it appears, against the 49ers, and they will have their full offensive line. Also, depth piece linebacker Jalen Reeves-Maben appears he will be back for this matchup against the 49ers. He was on longer-term IR. His injury designation clock was activated last week, and he was a full practice up until Thursday of this game for the 49ers. Now let's switch over to the 49ers, who are pretty much in shutdown mode here for 2024. And what a ride it's been for them here over the last year. Coming from the overtime loss in the Super Bowl to now being out of playoff contention here in Week 17 in 2024. So in turn, a lot of these updates will be roster moves as we head into this matchup with the Lions. They placed tackle Trent Williams on injured reserve. In turn, they signed kind of a depth piece center to have some pieces on their offensive line for the next couple of weeks. Matt Hennessy, a center from the Atlanta Falcons practice squad. They also shut down linebacker Dre Greenlaw for the season. He had the Achilles that he was recovering from, but he also suffered a knee, had a sore calf last week, so they're really just doing what's best for his long-term health, and will shut him down for the remainder of the season. They also placed their offensive lineman Jalen Moore on injured reserve as well, and signed another offensive lineman, Charlie Heck, from the Arizona Cardinals practice squad, again, to be able to field some sort of offensive line against this Lions team. And as far as injuries to monitor this week for the matchup with the Lions, Aaron Banks, their guard, did not practice on Thursday due to a knee injury. Spencer Buford, also their guard, a calf injury, was not at practice. Defensive end Robert Beal as well, suffering with an ankle injury, did not practice this Thursday. All are questionable for this matchup against the Lions. Limited practice on Thursday was Jair Brown, the safety, with an ankle. And really their only running back option who did return to practice this week, Isaac Guerrero, the running back who was suffering with a hamstring and foot injury. I believe he missed their previous matchup there against the Dolphins. He is on track to play here against the Lions, and they will need him because he is their really only true running back. They will use Deebo Samuel in a lot of other situations there for their rushing attack. Now let's get into these key matchups for Lions versus 49ers in Week 17. And I'm coming at it from two different angles, one based on strength and one based on weakness. So let's start with the biggest weakness, and that's the Lions front seven, that defensive line, versus the offensive line of the San Francisco 49ers, specifically the front seven against Brock Purdy, right? We know what killed the Lions in the NFC Championship game. There were a few things, but I think the main thing was Brock Purdy being able to escape pressure, avoid sacks, and then ultimately make the plays when they were needed. That killed the Lions last year. Well, both the Lions front seven and the offensive line of the 49ers are depleted entering this matchup. On the San Francisco side of things, of course, you still have Brock Purdy, who's shown that he can make those plays, and he still has weapons offensively that he can use in this matchup against the Lions. The Lions have a guy like Zadarius Smith, who we talked about how he's incentivized entering these last few weeks of the season. Lions are going to have to do everything they can to create and manufacture pressure like they did last week against Chicago and Caleb Williams. They really weren't able to get home often. Brock Purdy is similar in his athleticism. Maybe not as much, maybe not as fast, and he certainly has the smarts to know when to get rid of the football. So it will be an excellent matchup here in Week 17. And I bring up this matchup specifically because I believe this matchup affects what happens with the Lions secondary. If the Lions are not able to get the necessary pressure, and if Brock Purdy is able to pick apart this defense, that could mean tough things for the Lions secondary. We know they're still lacking Carlton Davis with the jaw injury, and Terrion Arnold suffering the illness this week, did not practice through Thursday. So we're not sure of his status for this matchup against the 49ers. That could put the Lions' depth pieces in the secondary in a tough position. We know what happened with Kendall Vildor in that matchup in the NFC Championship game. Now, I don't think anything like that will ever happen again, but the truth is the Lions don't have all of their pieces even in the secondary, which makes the matchup up front even more important. And now switching over to a place of strength, what I think will be the key matchup here in Lions versus 49ers is the Lions rushing attack versus the 49ers front seven. And regardless of what has happened with the 49ers here in 2024, their defense has still played well. Fred Warner, their all-pro linebacker, still leads the team, 117 tackles. Leonard Floyd, Nick Bosa, 15 and a half combined sacks. The Lions will have to be on the lookout for those gentlemen. They also have a lot of playmakers in the secondary. But we know what the Lions' strength is, their offensive line and their running game. The Lions are returning starting guard Graham Glasgow this week, so they will be at full strength. Jahmyr Gibbs has shown that he can be a solo back. Last week against the Chicago Bears, he held up very well. It actually looked like he changed the offense just a little bit. They even looked faster, if that's even possible. So to me, this is the biggest matchup. Can the Lions continue the rushing prowess they've had all season long with Jahmyr Gibbs and this healthy offensive line? Or can the 49ers make one last stand here in 2024? Now let's get into those key players or the X factors here for this Week 17 matchup, Lions versus 49ers. And we got to start with the quarterbacks. who both played well in the NFC Championship game, and I expect nothing less here in Week 17. Let's start with 49ers quarterback Brock Purdy. We talked about in a key matchup how he could be key to this game if he's able to make some plays with his legs. Right now in the season, he has 3,487 passing yards, a 65% completion rate, 17 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. But he's done a lot more scrambling this year, especially with their depleted running back room. He has 63 rush attempts for 311 rush yards on the season. Then, of course, on the Lions side, you have Jared Goff, who's playing MVP caliber quarterback here in 2024. Currently at 4,095 yards, a 71.4% completion percentage rate, and he's at 33 touchdowns to only 10 interceptions. This should be a fantastic quarterback matchup in Week 17. We talked about the importance of the Lions' rushing attack. Well, it will again be Jahmyr Gibbs solo in Week 17, but he was really good last week against the Bears. He had 23 rushes for 109 yards, but also contributed in the passing game. 4 receptions for 45 yards. He did have the rushing touchdown. Again, he is dynamic. He adds a level of speed to this offense, and they're able to do some creative things offensively. I think he will be another X factor here in this matchup against the 49ers. For the 49ers, their primary weapon all season long has been tight end George Kittle, and I think he will be a tough cover for the Lions here in Week 17. George Kittle on the season, 68 receptions, 987 yards, and 8 TDs, leads his team in all 3 categories. And we talked about the Lions' depleted linebacking crew as well as some struggles they're having in the secondary. I think in this matchup, they're going to have a tough time covering George Kittle. They're going to really welcome back a guy like Jalen Reeves-Maybin and some help in the linebacker depth to hopefully make up for that. But look for Kittle to make some moves here in Week 17. And on the Lions side, in any big game, you have to go to their big-time player, and that's Amon-Ra St. Brown, who was a little quiet last week, but always contributes in every way, shape, and form. On the season, he's already over 100 catches with 101, 1,126 yards, 11 touchdowns. And again, he's come up big in the past in this moment, and I expect it to be the same here in Week 17. We also talked about some of the key players defensively for the 49ers. Well, I think in this matchup, you got to look out for Nick Bosa, and the 49ers are able to move him around and about the defensive line. And I think that's the way you sort of get to this Lions offensive line, is you sort of confuse them, find different ways to attack them coming from the edge, the interior. Well, you certainly still have players like Nick Bosa that are able to do that in spades. So I think he makes a huge impact in this game. On the season, Nick Bosa, 44 tackles and 7 sacks here in 2024. I've talked on the channel in the past about that big motivator here for a lot of NFL players. And if it's not winning, it's usually money. Well, on the Lions side, a guy like Zadarius Smith now has both incentives. If the Lions win and Minnesota loses just prior Sunday, they could be looking at a number 1 seed for the NFC. But on top of that, Zadarius Smith with 2 more sacks on the season could be looking at an additional $250K. So I have to put him as an X factor in this matchup because God knows I'd be searching for a sack for that amount of money. And I know he will be too. And lastly, sticking with the Lions, I got to go with Brian Branch, who, again, has been quiet the past several weeks. And I think a lot of that is because of the shuffling they've had to do in their secondary to make up for injuries. They've also brought him up to help with run stuffing and to get some pressure on the quarterback because of their depleted linebacking crew. So they're asking a lot of a guy like Brian Branch. Well, as they start to get some pieces back, hopefully Terry Arnold's healthy this week. Hopefully, Ife Melifon was at the same level he was last week against Chicago. They're getting some linebacker depth back. So does that now allow Brian Branch to get back into his more natural state? And I think that makes him a natural playmaker. Well, I think you're going to see that here against the 49ers. The difference in this Week 17 matchup between Lions and 49ers will be the Lions offense overwhelming the 49ers. And it's very similar to what I indicated last week, but you're going again against a team who is starting to shut it down here in 2024, a team that's been eliminated from playoff contention. You have a lot of injuries on the 49ers side of things, and they're now starting to prepare themselves for next season. Well, the Lions have everything to play for moving forward here in 2024. This may be a game that has everything on the line. NFC North implications, a number 1 seed on the line. Even so, Motor City Dan Campbell has come out and said that they will do everything they can in this revenge tour game to get a victory. And I think that makes the ultimate difference here in Week 17. The Lions offense, even without David Montgomery, brings in a lot of weapons, and that was on full display last week against Chicago. Jahmyr Gibbs is the bell cow back. brings another dynamic aspect to this offense that is very much speed-based and is hard to keep up with. Do the 49ers still have enough talent defensively to hang in there with the Lions? And lastly, sometimes you need to break it down to the bare bones. The ultimate difference in any football matchup, offensive line play and the two quarterbacks. You could make the argument that although both quarterbacks were very good in the NFC Championship game, Brock Purdy was just that much better and helped them to a victory. I think that changes here in 2024. You have Jared Goff playing at an MVP level, the most efficient quarterbacking I have ever seen in Lions history. And I think that continues here in Week 17. That combined with their rushing attack and the overall power of this offense will just be too much for the 49ers in Week 17. The line for this game is currently set at Lions -3.5, and the over-under is set at 50.5 points. As I've laid out to you here through our key matchups, our X factors, and the difference in the game, I believe the Lions offense takes control in this matchup, and I think runs away with this football game. I have the Lions winning 31 to the 49ers 23. That would bring the Lions to 14-2 and would drop the 49ers to 6-10. So that's going to do it for my Week 17 game preview. Who do you got in this matchup, Lions or 49ers? And what will this matchup mean before we get to Monday night? Does Minnesota hold off Green Bay on Sunday, or do they drop that game and create a situation where the Lions are playing for everything in Week 17? Should be a very interesting weekend of football. Let me know what you guys think down below. If you can, please hit that like button. It's the best way to help out the channel. Of course, if you dig the vibe here at Johnny Gaz Sports, I'd love it if you consider subscribing to the channel. We're just now on our way to 3,000 thanks to you guys. And if you hit the notify bell, you won't miss any future videos. There's a membership option available. That's where I do all my live game play-by-plays, a ton of other fun stuff, but there is always free content here for you all the time. More than anything else, take care of yourself and that mental health. That is so important, and I want to make sure you come back and see me on future videos. I hope you guys had a fantastic holiday. Let's have a great new year, a great weekend ahead. Go Lions.